Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Before we begin this interview with Lior Gantz, I really want to compel you to consider prepping. It's time to prepare for a worst case scenario. I don't know if you saw this today, we cover it in part in this interview, but Tencent perhaps accidentally released the real numbers of the people dying in China from coronavirus. And according to the leak on February 1st, 154,000 people infected with a death toll of 24,589. We don't know what's going on in China. They're not telling us the truth. But if the numbers are that bad, it's definitely time to prepare. Here's what I suggest. Use my friends over at My Patriot Supply, and you can use the link below this video, preparewithsgtreport.com, to save 40% on your 2-week or 4-week emergency food supply. This extremely high-quality, storable food is grown and packed in the United States and includes 16 food varieties and up to a 25-year shelf life. So I'll leave the link below. I won't bore you with any more details, but know this: the delivery time was guaranteed at 2 days, and that is now expanding because supplies are running out. So get your emergency food supplies and plan ahead while you can. And let's begin. I have back on the line right now my friend Lior Gantz. He's the founder of wealthresearchgroup.com, which I subscribe to. You might want to do so as well. We're going to talk about all things economy today and so much more. Lior Gantz, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Let me ask you, Lior, did you happen to see the witch? You know, the witch, as I see it, really, when I use that term, I'm referring to Hillary Clinton. But as it pertains to the State of the Union address, I'm referring to Nancy Pelosi. Have you ever seen a more classless act than that woman shredding the speech just after the State of the Union address?
I think it was a rookie move, and she was probably waiting on it for like 80 minutes. She was like, when is my moment coming? When is my moment coming? Look, from the way I see it, because I'm not an American and I don't vote, right? I don't vote Republican or Democrat. Looking from the outside, you can really see the difference between the 73-year-old real estate tycoon that didn't come from politics, but obviously brushed shoulders with politicians throughout his life, etc. You can see that he has more poise. He has more moves. He is much more adept to dealing with many situations than politicians who bring no real world experience. He can stomach more pain. He can bear more suffering in terms of what they're throwing at him, because no other president has had to deal with even half of what President Trump has had to deal with in terms of the media. We wrote an entire report about this for your listeners at wealthresearchgroup.com/media that I believe is a must read in terms of how the fake media and the what he refers to as the lamestream media depict him as. And what's funny is it's almost like a double standard. The things that he cares about are very much American and patriotic and constitutional, and they somehow flip it to make it seem like he's an extremist. Do you remember 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago, early January, when the drone attack killed Qasem Soleimani? He was almost portrayed in the media as like a regular general who goes about his business every day and does nothing wrong, whereas the local media where I live, they marked him as one of only 4 persons in the Middle East history that cannot be replaced ever, Sean. So if you know the way that the terrorists are portrayed here in the Middle East, they say that, look, if you kill one, one will replace them, etc. Right? It's never ending.
Right.
But some people are regarded as so unique in terms of their networking and skills and the way that they lead people that there is no that they create a new Middle East, and this was as big as that. So look, this was a big achievement. They also made it seem like he thought about it in the middle of a golf game, whereas we know that this is 18 months worth of deliberations between him and his staff and everyone else. I think these sort of media propaganda events, and what we saw from Nancy yesterday, it shows me that in America today, there are people that are much more interested in being right than in being smart. In other words, they hate him so much that they put that over what is important for America.
Right.
Now, no one's perfect. He isn't perfect. There's many things that he does in an unpresidential way, right? He's he's very aggressive. He's very heads on, and maybe that's what the country needs. But
I think that's what the world needs. I mean,
yeah,
you probably watched his Davos speech. I mean, the man actually commands a room. People listen. He can't be bossed around. He's not bought and paid for, in my opinion, like Hillary Clinton, who famously told her Goldman Sachs crowd that she has two positions on every
yeah,
policy. One she tells the public, and one she tells her sponsors, her
exactly.
funders. Hey, getting back to Nancy Pelosi and that stunt last night, I can't think of anything less classy than what she did, and it's backfiring on her big time today. There's a term I want to use as it pertains to the Democrats, and the term is Bush League. Let me give you the definition. It's a noun, a minor league of a professional sport, especially baseball, and as an adjective, not of the highest quality or sophistication, second rate.
Okay.
These Democrats are such Bush League. They're so Bush League. They don't care about the country. They don't care about borders. They don't care about sovereignty. All they push is climate change. They want carbon taxes for bankers. They want open borders. They want illegals to vote in our elections. They want abortion on demand in the 9th month. Not only do they not stand for anything that's pro-American, they don't stand for anything that's pro-humanity. Among the Democrats currently running for president, from your vantage point, sitting outside of the United States looking back at this shit show, at this circus, can you pick one Democrat that could represent this country in any meaningful way? Can you pick one, Lior?
No, I can't, and I want to even further your point, because I think you're dead on. I think what's happening in the State of the Union address, what we saw him talk about, he did talk about the abortion part, and he also talked about a law that he just put into action, and I think it's a brilliant law. So he brought a brother of a murder victim in California. His brother was pumping gas in a gas station, just as anyone else would, and an illegal immigrant came and just gave him 8 bullets to the chest without provocation, without anything. He brought the brother was tearing up, and then he said, look, I put a law into place where you can sue California for being a sanctuary state for releasing illegal aliens back to society, and welcoming them and giving them rights and giving them social benefits, etc. I think that's a great step. Again, you're seeing the ingenuity, the creativeness of President Trump. He's using legitimate ways, so laws, in order to help the citizens. He's not trying to do a workaround. He's doing the legitimate thing. And I think that's part of the presidency, is that he's so capable. He has got the economy to where it is, with deregulations, with tax cuts, with things that are legitimate. Whereas, as we know, a lot of presidents chose war in order to incentivize the U.S. economy, like the Bushes. I don't have to tell you endless wars that the United States has waged in order to stimulate their economy, oil, etc. So I think he is absolutely the opposite. And if looking from the outside, I don't see why somebody would not like his strategies. I don't see what's wrong with them. If you dissect them one by one, their only unintended consequence is in the future, in his next term, he will have to deal with the giant deficits the tax cuts are creating. And as you saw yesterday, he told the people, we are not going to default on your Social Security or on your healthcare. So, postponing entitlements and anything like that might have really shrunk the national debt, that's not on the table at all. What I think he did brilliantly, and actually I wrote about this a year ago. I said he will introduce in 2019, if you read wealthresearchgroup.com/election and /epic, I wrote that in 2020, once this election comes close, he will announce that an infrastructure program is really something that he's advocating. The reason is it's a bipartisan, everyone wants it. The Democrats want it, and the Republicans can jump on this bandwagon. And now a lot of Democratic voters will say, well, hey, if Trump is giving me the only thing I wanted to vote Democrats for, which is an infrastructure program that will get me back to work and revive the construction economy, etc., why do I need to vote for a Democrat? The second thing that I love that he did, he announced that he's running for president for a second term on day one of his presidency. That has never been done. The way, the legality of it means that he could have raised funds from November 8th, 2016 or November 6th, 2016, whenever the election was. From that day, he could have started raising funds. Usually, 6 months before the elections, candidates have $3, $4, $5 million. He has $400 million right now in donations. So if you're talking about what you'll see going forward in terms of how much money he can spend, it's insane. Mm-hmm. And that's very important because he's running against the corporate media. The corporate media is right there to show everyone, hey, vote Democrat, vote Democrat.
And Biden's broke, by the way. Biden's campaign is absolutely broke. Did you know that? So the front runner, the mainstream media tells us that Joe Biden is the front runner, creepy Joe Biden, meanwhile ignoring the crimes, the very real crimes of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden in Ukraine. And they tell us Biden, or at least they have been telling us prior to the Iowa caucus, that Joe Biden is the front runner and he's broke. Nobody in his own party wants to donate to that guy. Hey, you mentioned deficits. So if we could circle back to that, the U.S. deficit. Sure. Let's talk a little bit about the economy. If there is any criticism of this president, it's the spending, the hand over fist spending. But that's been true with all previous presidents as well. And as you know, most of that spending has been on wars. At least we're not in any new wars. Now, as we take a look at the global economy, I'm very concerned about coronavirus. We can talk about that in a minute. The real numbers of the deaths may be far more staggering than we're being told. So we'll circle back to that in a second, and I'll provide some evidence that suggests this thing is out of control. But as we take a look at the global economy, we know because of coronavirus, China just pumped in 1 trillion won to try to keep their economy afloat with entire cities being quarantined and shut down. So when we think about the hand over fist spending of the United States, we also have to think about how all the other countries are operating. How does this end? Pumping fiat money into economies just to keep them afloat isn't going to work forever, and sooner or later, smart money is going to be going to precious metals. How does this whole thing end in your view?
First of all, in terms of the Chinese, they not only pumped renminbi into the economy, they also banned short selling, which is very uncapitalistic. So in a free capitalism society, if there's something to capitalize on, then investors should have the right to capitalize on it. So they did many things, and they will keep doing many things. It's a very central command society. They go from the top down, whereas in the United States we cherish individualism and we put it on the shrine. Over there they put the country, and then from the country it goes down to the family and to the individual. So very different countries, very different mentalities, and that is not about to change. So you're seeing very different states of mind. In the U.S., the actual portion of the interest paid on the national debt is the lowest in its history. So if you look at the interest payments, it's nominally high. It is $1.5, $1.6 billion a day, which amounts to about $500 billion a year. But in terms of the total GDP and how much the entire country is worth, it's now meaningless. And that's why Trump is really advocating for zero interest rates, because in his mind is if you hike interest rates or low interest rates, just a little bit, because you can't hike them over 2.25. You saw what happened in December of 2018 when the Fed tightened to 2.25 on the Fed's fund rate. In 1 month, you saw 19.2% decline in the S&P 500. That's insane. So they will never do that. And the reason they can't do that is because all of these corporations recapitalize at these low rates. And if you jack up their rates, their interest payments goes up by hundreds of percent. So many corporations cannot survive in high interest rates. Not just governments can print, as you say. Corporations have to pay the bills. And so when Ray Dalio's deputy said in Davos that the boom and bust cycle is over, what he meant by that is that the Fed cannot keep tightening and loosening anymore. It has to keep loosening, and you have to keep it loose until such time as either inflation starts going a lot higher, and then you have this restructuring of debt and debt jubilee and everything else that we talk about in terms of a reset, what you refer to as the end game, which can be orderly, somewhat orderly, where governments would take giant losses on each other's bonds, and even domestic bondholders will take giant losses. Pension funds will take giant losses, but we'll just clear everything. And again, people will take giant losses. If you think 2008 was bad, where people lost around $8 trillion in equity, if bonds go higher in interest, the price of the bond will go down. If you have to restructure the entire thing, it is estimated to be double the size of what happened in 2008. So about $16 trillion worth of equity will be lost. That's a huge amount. And also important to remember that central banks themselves own about 80% of all this negative yielding bonds. So if people keep asking themselves, who wants a negative yielding bond? Well, no one. The central banks themselves are monetizing this in order to keep the game going. But going back to what Trump wants, the reason he considers the Fed an enemy is because they're standing in the way of a bigger plan. The bigger plan is to lower interest rates to zero, effectively marginalizing the Fed out of the picture. Because if interest rates are zero, and that's your main tool as a central banker, and now you can't do anything with it, then you're out of the picture. And what happens is monetary policy is shrunk to the side, and then fiscal policy becomes more important. Deregulation, tax cuts, programs, opportunity zones, and whatever the government can do. And so that's what he wants, because we saw for the last 11 years that if you only act on monetary policy, if you only lower interest rates and unleash this into the economy without any proper restrictions and incentives, what companies do is buy back their own shares. And higher management enjoys this, shareholders enjoy this, but
the product suffers. The product suffers. Look at Boeing. Endless buybacks, and then they manufacture a plane no one can fly.
Yeah, and the economy is still growing only 2% per year, so your wages are not going up. The only person that's enjoying this is the top 1% or the top 10%. So that's monetary policy just unleashed without any restrictions. What Trump likes to do is set policy and then incentivize the right people to do the right thing. So if you're buying back shares, that's fine. If you're buying back shares, that's great. But you have to hike wages by about 2%, 3% a year. If you have to incentivize companies to do the right thing under the right conditions, or just don't meddle with interest rates and let them, that's a bigger debate, obviously. And it's preposterous that a group of 12 academics sit in a room and dictate interest rates for the entire world. It's absolutely, there is no logic to it.
Well, it reminds me of the Rothschild LBMA, the London Metals Bullion Exchange, the LBMA, where they would set the price of gold twice a day. I mean, can you think of anything more preposterous? So, but in your view, how does this all end? When will it end? Will it never end? Is the Dow going to 50,000, 100,000? We're just going to kick the can down the road forever?
I think it's important to distinguish between two things, the private sector and the government. So the private sector is not in trouble at all. Companies are doing fantastic. If you were to take the entitlements, for example, and postpone them to age 72, you wouldn't even have a deficit problem. So what we're trying to do is have the best of both worlds. Let people retire at 65, even though the average person lives to 72 in America. And when these entitlements were introduced, people were living until 57. So at 65, you wouldn't even get there. Now it's flipped. The world has changed, but we have these entitlements that are not good for today's world. But on the flip side, you have probably 2 billion baby boomers around the world that are promised their entire lives, and they've designed their entire lives on this arbitrary age of 65. So, but now, to answer your question, the private sector is doing fantastic. Companies are doing amazing. The problem is not the private sector at all. As you can see, the private sector is creating more and more jobs. They're going to bring people into the economy. The biggest problem right now for the U.S. is that it doesn't have enough skilled workers. So that again goes back to the government, education, and what they've done with this entire college tuition bullshit, where they've raised the tuition to levels. Who needs a college degree that costs $250,000?
Yeah, they've done the same thing with health insurance too. The health insurance situation in this country is absolutely untenable. It's off the hook. It's out of control.
Yes. And Trump talked about it last night. He, in the State of the Union address, what he said was, "I will not let socialism ruin healthcare for 170 million happy customers of private healthcare." And then obviously what he hints is capitalism beats socialism. That's basically the main point here. If you're asking me about the end game, what he's trying to do is really push that can down the road a lot, and do it in a way that doesn't cost Americans a lot of money. What he wants to do, like I said, is lower interest rates to zero and then start issuing 50 and 100-year bonds. Now, who buys American debt? Whoever buys American debt is a lot of foreigners, a lot of foreign countries, a lot of central banks. And remember, central banks in other countries are nationalized. This is not like in the US where it's overseen by Congress and it's semi-independent and all that kind of stuff. It's nationalized. So other countries will go ahead and buy 50-year bonds or 100-year bonds at zero interest rates. So now your own tax money will not fund these bonds. And as an American, as a citizen, you can choose, I don't want to lend my government money, so you don't do that. There will be enough demand for foreign entities to do that. So that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to basically restructure this entire deficit to 50 and 100 years forward. And by that time, you can think of what to do. The national debt is not a pressing problem for tomorrow, just because the world as it's set up right now has this structure where there's so much money chasing yield and can't find it. That's why interest rates are this low, and that's why central banks can keep them this low. The second factor is demographics. The demographics are such that for the first time in history, there are more 40-year-olds and up than 40-year-olds and down. And so you're looking at a very aging economy where tax receipts will not be able to create sufficient funds to fund the government. Everyone knows that, and it's now a matter of how to solve it. And a lot of presidents do not want to tackle this, and Trump is not one of them. He's going to tackle this head on. In my opinion, that's going to be the focal point of the second term. He's going to try and see how you can create an environment where the national debt at least can be under control.
Sure.
And obviously, this will not only come from tax receipts. This has to become a national issue with sacrifices and with victims and winners and everything like that. At the end of the day, the United States economy is 25% of the world's economic activity. It's a powerhouse. With 330 million people, this country has, with all of its detriments, it just creates so much innovation and so much money and wealth for the entire world. Then you have China with 15% of the world's economy. And that's why if you take this phase 1 deal and then put a phase 2 deal on it, there's 4 out of every $10 that are created in wealth are done by 2 countries that now are working with each other. That's very big. So I love the fact that we have 2 of these countries that talk with each other instead of, at each other's odds, or one country, looting the other country directly, indirectly, purposely, unpurposely. Jobs went away. 60,000 factories went to other countries while presidents resided over this country, looting the middle class, just absolutely looting them. And again, globalism can be interpreted as good or bad or whatever you want. If you are outsourcing jobs out of this country, high paying jobs for people that are 40, 45, 50, have families, then you have to incentivize companies to do that with the right, with the right infrastructure on top of it. So you can't just let go of these people. You have to retrain them into society, into new skills. You cannot leave them on the sidelines because your company can manufacture the product cheaper elsewhere.
Well, Ross Perot warned us exactly what was going to happen if all the jobs were outsourced and the factories went overseas, and they threatened his family for telling the truth. Let me ask you this. All right, so we're not exactly sure how this is going to end or when it's going to end, and I agree with you. President Trump is doing the right thing on behalf of the country, but there is a black swan that we need to address, and it's coronavirus. So let me do a screen share here for you. I think this is very frightening. Of course, there's Pelosi shredding a State of the Union speech, offering a lame excuse. But just below that, did China's Tencent accidentally leak the true terrifying coronavirus statistics? Now, I don't know if you've seen any of the video leaking out of Wuhan and elsewhere in China, but it's very, very disturbing. We're seeing men with automatic weapons roaming the streets, military men, all done up in their biohazard suits. And I'm starting to wonder if they're not terminating people that have the coronavirus. Now, according to this Tencent leak, the epidemic situation tracker briefly showed confirmed coronavirus cases of, as of February 1st, 154,000 cases, 10 times the official figure, and a death toll of 24,589. Now, we have no way of vetting any of this, but I think it's far, far worse in China than they're letting on. It's far worse, and 10 times as bad as they're letting on may well be the case. Is this the black swan that brings the world economy to its knees? Or could it be? Could it be?
Okay. Let's take the conservative look and say China's reporting as is. It's the official numbers are what they are. Still, you're talking about a country where 50 million people are in quarantine. So just think of the US, 50 million people. That's the entire state of California, and another state that has about 10 million people, which is one of the biggest states in America. There aren't many states in the 50 states that have 10 million people. So it's a lot of people. Now, where does it really hurt the economy? Products are shipped in and out of China every day. If there's an issue with kids' toys, you realize that China is the biggest exporter of kids' toys in the world. It manufactures basically, I think, like 80% of kids' toys. You can manufacture something that might be contaminated. The other way around works as well. China imports many things. If you import stuff, you need to bring them on ships. Then when they hit the ports, if those ships get contaminated, then go back to their home ports, you're bringing the epidemic to other places. Then obviously you have Chinese New Year, which is actually happening right now, where 100 million Chinese are traveling all over the world. It's the biggest human migration on the planet. And so this has the potential, even if it's reported as is, to really hurt GDP, really hurt. And that's why you see the Chinese stock market falling 9% in one day, why they're pumping currency into the economy. And it's also why yields on bonds are going down, because people are chasing safe havens, so-called safe havens, and bringing down the yield. If there's a lot of demand for a bond, then the yield goes down. So it has the potential to become a real big problem. It's already a big problem just on the face of it. Even if there's no deaths, just stopping entire cities, it curtails demand for oil, for many other things. It's a disruptor. It's a huge disruptor. Hopefully, and I hope and pray that this doesn't become a big deal and it's contained and people find a solution for it. In a recent flight that I took, I watched the miniseries Chernobyl. And in that miniseries on Netflix, what you can really see is that the values debated are the price of truth versus the price of cover-up. Mm-hmm. So the cover-up has a short-term effect of calming the public. But in the long term, once the truth is out, if the truth is different than the cover-up, which by definition it would be if there's a cover-up, then that's a real big problem. And that's what happened in Chernobyl. They did not acknowledge that the core of the nuclear facility has exploded, and then you're releasing radiation every hour that is like 40 atom bombs dropped on Hiroshima. And so people didn't know. Only when the wind carried it to Germany and to other parts of Europe, and they called, the USSR and said, "What's going on?" Only then did they start to acknowledge that there's a real big problem here. So I think that's important. It's important we know the facts from China. It's important, whatever they are, bad or good. You have to deal with truth and not with lies. It's extremely important. So I think that is one of the most pressing issues, to know exactly what's going on so everyone can prepare.
Yeah, well, and everybody needs to prepare because, if this thing hits our shores in any way, shape, or form, even 10% as bad as it appears to be in China, we're going to see grocery stores bare, and we're going to see the economy grind to a halt. Because who's going to want to go sit in a movie theater? Who wants to go to a basketball game in an arena? Who's going to want to do anything if this thing spills into our shores? And what concerns me is this fact, and I believe it's a fact, is the coronavirus is a bioweapon. Now the question is, was it released on purpose or by accident? Doesn't matter. A bioweapon is a bioweapon, and it's designed to kill people. So it is very scary. We'll keep our eye on this situation as it unfolds, because I think it's one of the most important topics of the day. Final question. Gold, silver, Bitcoin. Where do you see any of these things going here in the future? Any prognostications? We have Guggenheim Investments saying silver's their number one pick for 2020. And meanwhile, I saw this today over on Zero Hedge. Bitcoin price may hit $27,000 all-time high by summer, predicts FundStrat's Tom Lee, highlighting May's block reward halving as the catalyst for his Bitcoin price expansion. Your thoughts on gold, silver, and Bitcoin as we wrap up?
Sure. In general, I am of the opinion that a person should own physical gold as a priority. The way I structured my life, if you read wealthresearchgroup.com/gold playbook, you would see what I've done is basically take my living expenses for my family unit, multiplied it by 24. So basically 24 months worth of living, and bought physical gold for that amount. So if there's any issue, any recession or depression that lasts even 2 years, I have 2 years worth of today's purchasing power of gold stored. That's the first priority. To me, because gold and silver used to have functionalities in day-to-day transactions, where gold was, what governments and what large transactions required, while silver was more of a day-to-day exchanges between people. This doesn't happen anymore. So the reason to own silver as an individual is quite diminished, because it's duplicated by what gold can do for you. They do the same thing. That's why silver has gotten demonetized and industrialized. Having said that, you saw what happened in 2011 when there's real inflation scare. So to me, silver is more of a trade. When you see the technical analysis point towards a breakout in gold and silver, silver is the better one to own short term, even options or silver miners, because that can go nuts. That can really go nuts. You saw, what happened last year. I'll give you an example. A good friend of mine used the options market to generate hundreds of percent of gains in about a week to 2 weeks. So that's what I like about silver. It's extremely volatile, and when you have these confirmations on a technical analysis basis, it's very good to own silver miners or the options. If you know what you're doing, obviously these are more complicated trading strategies than normal. But for 100%, you need to own physical gold. There is no reason not to. If Berkshire Hathaway, if Buffett wasn't this stubborn about gold, always comparing gold to stocks for some reason, instead of comparing it to the 128 billion in cash that he has. If he would have siphoned half of the cash all the time to gold, he would probably be worth just in personal net worth probably $300 to $400 billion, and Berkshire would be about double or triple what it is today. So he's made a huge mistake, and I don't see why he doesn't admit it, because it's so obvious. Gold has gone from 35 an ounce to 15.50 an ounce since 1971. That's an insane return. An insane return for a non-productive asset. Like you said, an ounce of gold will always be an ounce of gold, but the price protection that you get for your savings is unbelievable. So that's why I love gold. In terms of where I think it can go, it can definitely reach new all-time highs in dollar denominated. It's already done that in 70 other currencies, including the euro and including the yen. So you're looking at a currency, you're looking at a metal that is legitimized as money traditionally over the years, traditionally over the centuries, and the only currency it's not trading at an all-time high, the only major currency is the dollar. So I think that is coming next. It could take 2 to 3 years, but 100%, in my opinion, it's going to breach that $2,000 an ounce range as we see the dollar start declining. Now, you can Google the DXY, which is the dollar index, or the Bloomberg trade weighted dollar index. Both of them have traded higher for 8 years. We have been in a dollar bull market compared to other fiat currencies for 8 years, since 2011. And you can really see those cycles so predictable, where as the dollar tops off at, let's say 130 on the Bloomberg trade weighted one, it goes down about 25% over the next 5-6 years. That's the cycles. That's the dollar cycles. It cannot become too strong. Otherwise, too strong of a dollar and you can't export your goods. This is not like gold where it can just generally go higher. This is a fiat currency that competes with other fiat currencies, and therefore it has cycles no matter how you look at it. The dollar is going to become weaker in the next few years. Little growth, a lot of growth in the economy, doesn't matter. That's the cycle. And that's why I like silver overall, but I think it should be a trade and not a long-term holding. Long-term, it will underperform gold under this monetary system. Where Bitcoin comes in here, look, Wealth Research Group, early 2017, Bitcoin is around $500 a coin, and we cover it for the first time. I love Bitcoin. I love Bitcoin for a number of reasons, but the main reason I like it is because if some companies, such as if some companies that are working on solutions for Bitcoin to make it user-friendly can achieve what they're after, a lot of people would choose Bitcoin over fiat currencies. It doesn't. We don't have to talk about the U.S., where, relatively speaking, the dollar is very stable. But let's talk about the other continents, where people earn about $20 to $30 a day, and not in Europe, but obviously in Central America, South America, India, China, Indonesia, Africa, which is the fastest growing continent on the planet, and they're all unbanked. So Bitcoin has insane potential. Technology-wise, the technology is out of this world. It does not have, like gold, the sort of a commoditized intrinsic value. That's true. So in other words, if you can't do anything else with a Bitcoin except transact, right? It's not like gold where it's jewelry or an electric conductor. And I understand that argument. It has its own unique abilities that deserve a premium. Like anything else, its price is very subjective, but justifiably so. It is subjectively going up because it's unique. It's very unique. Again, like gold, it is a non-productive asset. So unless companies figure out a way to loan your Bitcoin for interest, and then it does become like a cash flowing asset. For now, the idea of it is obviously, one, it'll be very difficult to ever confiscate Bitcoin that anyone owns, because you can basically store it on yourself, and it's not something governments will deal with. Governments cannot shut it down. That's the unbelievable part of it. The fact that it's easy to carry, I just mentioned. So it has all these components and properties to it that are incredible. At the end of the day, it's either massively accepted used, or it dies off and just becomes a great idea that was never materialized into something massive. The
Well,
reason
we
it's
have a
going
10-year track record now, too. You look back
exactly,
a decade, and I don't think it's
exactly,
going away. As we're having this conversation today, Bitcoin is up big again. It's at, I think, 9,700, just north of 9,700. And
exactly.
it just
So
crossed its 200-day moving average, which every time it's done that in the past, it's gone up about 200% from there. So the $27,000 price prediction is not nuts. And in fact, Max Kaiser has been saying $100,000 Bitcoin for a very long time.
Yeah, look, I'm very bullish on Bitcoin. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is, during its early years, its formative years, a lot of people were saying, "Look, this is a great idea, but who knows what will happen." Now it has this network effect. It's not going away.
Right.
It definitely isn't going away. What needs to happen next is for companies to figure out ways for anyone to use it, for you to use it, for me to use it, for everyone to use it in a very friendly way, like we swipe a credit card or make a payment otherwise. And then, my God, who knows how much one Bitcoin would be worth? There's only 21 million of them, and you can't create more. You can fork it, you can use altcoins, etc. But this one is safer. Nobody's been able to hack it. You have so many features that are above and beyond the other altcoins out there. So,
and you know what I've started to believe here, just I think mainly because of the coronavirus, is really opening my eyes to these cryptocurrencies and the value they have for rich people who want to get their money out. I mean, do you want to use the SWIFT system? You want to go through the Fed to try to transfer your money? Good luck. And I'm not proselytizing either. I'm not a big cryptocurrency proselytizer, but I, like you, was telling people to start dipping the foot in the pool back at around Bitcoin 400 back in 2015, 2016. I said, look, I don't know if it's going to go back to its all-time high. At that point, it was 2,100. I said, but I bet it will. And not only did it, it went to 20,000. And so here we are back around 9,700. I don't think it's going away either. Lior, I really appreciate your time today. Can you tell people how they can follow you and shout out the website?
Yeah, definitely. The financial newsletter is at wealthresearchgroup.com, and the easiest way is just to subscribe on the homepage. We cover basically the macroeconomics as well as very strategic, personalized topics. If you go to the top menu of the website, you'll see a special reports tab, a button, and that's where I basically aggregated about 16 years worth of information and data that I've collected into PDF downloads that are free. So that's also a great wealth of information, something you can do over the weekend, go over some of these reports to talk about anything from investment principles to cryptos to precious metals and Trump. There's a myriad of them.
Excellent. All right. That's wealthresearchgroup.com. Our guest has been Lior Gantz. Thanks, Lior.
Thank you, sir.
All right. And friends, thank you so much for tuning in. You know how much we appreciate it. A special shout out to our patrons. Thanks for keeping us in the fight. And for real news, you guys can visit us directly at sgtreport.com, where my latest 3 videos are always at the very top of the page. Thanks for tuning in, guys. God bless. Bye-bye.
Final word is the boat is rocking violently. We're starting to see these, really the forerunner metals here are warning us. Keep your eye on palladium and platinum. I know they're industrial metals, but ultimately the shortage in these metals as investors run to protect themselves from loose money is going to translate into silver and gold.